Hi, I'm Elisa Wyatt for Pilatesology, and I'm here at Trish Garland Pilates Studio in Sherman Oaks, which is one of the main teacher training hubs, especially on the West Coast, for Ramona's Pilates for many, many years. I think Ramona's been coming here for at least 20 years for her program. And Cynthia Lochard, who I'm interviewing today, has been coming for many years as well.
Since about '08.
Okay, so quite a long time. And Cynthia is one of Ramona's Pilates' highest leveled teacher trainers. She's one of only 4, I think, at your level in the teacher training program there. And she travels the world for several months a year teacher training for Ramona's Pilates. But Cynthia is actually stationed and located, has a studio in Sydney, Australia. And what's the name of your studio there?
Cynthia Lochard's Pilates Method Studio.
Cynthia Lochard's Pilates Method Studio. So if you're looking for teacher training in Australia or thereabouts, she's the place to go for sure. So today, Cynthia, I have a lot of great questions for you. So many wonderful things to learn because Cynthia started her training with Ramona as a young dancer in 1976, I think it was, which is, as you can...
long time
ago. But I think I wanted to start out by just asking, before we even go into your history, it's been a long time since 1976, and I imagine you have maybe even the vaguest memories of your first few lessons, but what has changed about Pilates since that time? What would you say about the state of Pilates now versus what it was like when you started?
The number of people doing it.
For sure.
That's pretty much the main thing. There's so many studios just in LA alone, like driving up and down Ventura Boulevard. There's like
everywhere you look.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
There's one across the road, one down the road, one we went into the CVS. There was one in that shopping center.
Wow.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's really different because back when I was doing it, I think, in my mind, I think Ramona's studio was one of the only ones I knew about in Manhattan. Certainly was where we all went wanting to learn Pilates, or where we were sent.
As a dancer. So how did that start for you? Did you have an injury like many dancers come to it? What happened?
I had a teacher who used to be a soloist with New York City Ballet, and she was intent on her students getting jobs. And so she encouraged us to do all things, everything that we could to better ourselves and to prevent ourselves from being injured, or, you know, some of us were tighter than others and needed to develop more extension and all that sort of thing. So she encouraged us to do Pilates and to get Rolfed, which is something I didn't ever do. I wasn't really into pain. Everyone was coming back like emotionally broken down. I thought,
maybe
I'll stick to the Pilates. Yeah. But that's how I got into it.
So did she tell you where to go, or did you guys find Ramona yourself, or how did that happen?
Yeah, everybody knew about Ramona because Paul, her son, was in the company at the time. He had just left, I think, and Suzanne was still in the company. And Suzanne was her daughter-in-law. She was married to Ramona's son,
Paul.
So it was a small community, and everybody knew. A lot of people worked with Carola, who were with the company.
Carola Touriere is another teacher who was close to Joe and was around and had opened her own studio.
Yeah. And so I never went to Carola, so I don't know why a lot of the dancers ended up seeing Carola, but I ended up with Ramona. But that's how everybody was just doing things, and they were, that's where you went.
Very cool. And do you remember anything about that early experience with Pilates?
I hated it.
It seems common.
Because it was extra work.
Yeah.
It was just more work, You were doing so many classes.
Yeah.
And everything else. And then, you had to add this on. So I used to go really early in the morning. And the one time I decided to get myself a bicycle in Manhattan and sort of ride to the theater rather than take public transport was going to Pilates, parking it outside of that studio that was on 56 between 6th and 5th. And it got stolen the very first day I had it. And it was at Pilates that happened, so.
That happened to me with my first
another
bike.
memory.
Yeah, my first bike in New York got stolen the first day I rode it somewhere too. I thought it was so secure, and no, not at all.
So
that only happened once.
But it was great. She had a couple of great teachers. Rodney, I don't remember his last name, was one of them, and Patrick White was another. He was scary to work with because he was really intense, very strict. He worked us really hard. And Ramona was always a little scary because you knew she had such a great eye that you couldn't get away with anything. But most of the time, when I went, she would be sitting at her desk doing the business, doing the paperwork, which is a way that a lot of people have not seen her in the latter part of her life.
Yeah.
But she was doing it all. She was quite the multitasker, which is something she taught me when she used to come out to Sydney and I started my business. Because I'd forgotten that about her, but she was able to sort of watch me run around like a maniac, and then just before I'd put her on a plane, she'd say one or two things, and I would go,
oh, that's helpful. Wow.
Oh, that's what I shouldn't be doing.
Right. What were any tips that you remember that she offered?
Not carrying around a phone was one of them. Leaving my diary in the studio. Because at the time I didn't have a landline, so I did everything. I had my diary with me all the time and my phone. And she knew that would lead to never having a break.
Right.
So
she would tell you save that for the end of the day or for the time that you sit
leave
down.
it in the studio.
Interesting. That's great. Yeah.
Work hard, play harder. No.
Well, that is something that I really feel gets lost a little bit when we start teaching so much, is that Ramona did seem to have such a full, balanced life that, I mean, I always saw her working so hard, but she made it seem really fun.
Yeah.
And
because she had other things in her life, too. Obviously, she had her children. Later in life, she had her grandchildren that she loved to hear about. And she also would open up her life in her home to all her students. Like, we were there, she was so generous with that part of herself.
Right.
So you would work hard during the day, and then at night everybody would go to her place. You know, maybe not every night, but more often than not. And she would order up food for everybody from the restaurant downstairs if there was no time to cook, and she would have music, and we never sat around and talked about work. We just ate and danced.
Wow.
And drank wine.
That's wonderful.
Or champagne in her case. Yeah, it was. It was really nice.
Very special.
Yeah.
And were her kids around then too, or was it?
Shari was at that time. Paul had already moved to Texas, I think. So Shari was around quite a bit. And Daria a little bit. Daria was just starting high school, I think. So she was probably, more involved with her own friends and things.
Of course. Wow. What a special time to have been around for all of that. And so how many of you and your dance friends stayed or are kept going to Pilates? How long did that kind of go on for?
Well, I didn't go with my dance friends. I was there. We all continued throughout our career. I mean, Pilates was something that was a big part of our lives.
Right.
With everything else we did. In fact, City Ballet, there were so many of us doing it at one point that they bought a reformer. And we traveled with it. I remember having it up at Saratoga backstage with the crates.
Wow.
But I was the only one using it, myself and Stephanie Saland. We were the only two people that would go back there and utilize it.
Wow.
But I remember that. I remember that taking a reformer up with them. So the dancers, they were around throughout their careers, in and out of the studio. But when I went, would go just on my own.
Right.
because everybody had different schedules.
Yeah. So tell us about how you decided to become a teacher. I know that it's something that really, like, for me, it was like, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. It was so kind of like hit me over the head, but I don't know if it's that way for everyone.
It was for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely that. It was definitely something that I knew. Well, when I left New York, I moved to Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't get into the personal reasons why or how I got there, but I ended up in Sydney. And one of the things that I thought for sure I would get a job as a dancer.
In Sydney?
Yeah, which didn't happen. But I was never that worried about that because I thought, well, if that doesn't happen, the other thing that I would love to do that I know that I do well and am passionate about was Pilates. And I thought that I could maybe bring a machine over and just start doing the work, or find somebody over there that was doing it, which wasn't so easy in the end, that part of it.
Yeah.
Or I was also at the time working, doing some white cloud.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we called it white cloud. Now people know it as gyrotonics.
Yes.
And so between that and Pilates, I thought that I would do one or the other because I was really passionate about both.
Right. Movement.
So I wasn't really too worried about the outcome of my life, leaving and going so far away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen straight away.
Mm-hmm.
But I did find somebody straight away there that I started doing Pilates with, and it wasn't that recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel as good as I know it could feel, so I didn't stick with it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting a job with Sydney Dance Company, so I worked in Sydney, and I didn't bring the Pilates with me. And then while in Sydney Dance Company, somebody came and was trying to introduce the Pilates. They wanted to use the space.
Okay. Right.
There.
Right.
So they were trying to introduce the Pilates to the company and have the company sort of fund putting up a space for them to perform it. So I was the only one in the company that knew anything about it, and I was like,
I know this.
I know this. So I kind of lobbied for it to happen, and a studio was eventually opened on the premises.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I started doing the work with them again, and then it was Rael who set that up. Some of the students that he had trained in Australia at a college called McDonald College.
This is
And so-
Rael, how do you pronounce his last
I
name?
don't know.
Iskowitz, I think.
Yeah, Iskowitz.
Okay.
And so he came out, after they had set the studio up at the dance company, he came out and I had a lesson with him. He tried to convince me to work for him in that studio. And I never did because I was dancing. I had a career. So
Right, right.
I wasn't interested then, but then I had children and it became very difficult to raise my children and perform at night. And at that point I was a single parent, so I had to try and do something else with my life.
And so Pilates was still there.
Pilates was still there.
Right.
I didn't remember it was there quite as deeply as it was.
Yeah.
I had just completely, my past was drifting so far away.
Yeah.
So it kind of helped me come back to myself, really.
Yeah.
It was my sort of
That's a
savior.
really cool thing to hear, because I feel like that it's an ongoing topic that I see coming up over and over in forums and discussions and things like that. People start talking about, well, is Pilates a philosophy of life, or what is it that it sort of lifts people up?
Yeah.
You see it a lot.
It's a lifestyle. It's part of a life. It's part of your life. It's a lifestyle. It's sort of, it inspires. The work in itself is kind of uplifting in a way that it just gives you strength to do all the things that you need to do.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. I think
So
that's a great way to put it.
yeah.
It gives you a strength that makes other things feel easier,
Yeah.
but it's a very uplifting, not like I had to work
Physically
so
and
hard.
emotionally.
Yeah.
It's just.
It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Common sense was another phrase.
Common sense, yeah.
We were talking about the fact that Ramona and the word common sense came up a lot in learning, and how organic that all was. And talk about, okay, so when about was it that you started thinking, gosh, maybe I will take Pilates to to Australia. This can be my thing.
Well, I was already in Australia.
Right.
And I decided I needed to have something to do.
Yes.
And so I sat down, I made a list. I didn't know what I was going to do, because up until that point I had danced my whole life from the time I was 4.
Yeah.
And fortunately I was successful at it.
Yeah.
And I could pay my rent doing that. And
Have a long career.
yeah. So I had to sit down and make a list. And in making that list, Pilates came up, and I went, oh yeah, I loved Pilates, I know Pilates. So I started to research where I could do the training, and I looked around Australia and called a few places, and they weren't very friendly or forthcoming with information. It wasn't very easy. And then I thought, well, stuff that, I'll just go back home and do
Right.
it. And then so I researched that, and at the time, Sean was just starting to try and set up. He had ownership.
And this is, I'll say that it's Sean Gallagher.
Yeah.
And he and Ramona were partners at the time, or?
Well, he owned the business, and she was it,
Yes. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So I guess they were partners of a sense.
Right. He was the business side of
He
the
was the
partnership.
business side of the partnership. And so I came back to New York, hung out with Mom, and did the apprenticeship.
Did you
out
have
of
an
purchase.
awareness how
it's
special?
like $1,000.
Wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, the whole thing. And we did it as intensive. So you would go in, you would learn
12 days
everything, 12
nonstop.
days from beginning to end, and then you would just go and practice that.
Wow. That's cool. Did
Yeah,
you
it was
have
cool.
an awareness of how special it was that did you know whom you had been learning from all this time?
No, I didn't. And even going back, because I knew Sean, because Sean was a training physical therapist with City Ballet. So I
Right.
knew Sean, which is why I decided to go in with him.
Right, it made sense. And I hear
And
he's an amazing physical therapist as well.
He is.
Yeah.
And so I was out in Purchase, I was doing the training program, and then the last few days, Shari and Ramona came out to do the last portion of it. And when they walked, first of all, Sean walked through the door, and I went, oh, I know him. And then Shari and Ramona walked through, and it wasn't only till then that I realized that
Where you had ended up.
where I'd ended up, and that I'd known these people, and I'd worked with them
Wow.
for
That's
so
pretty-
long in my youth growing up, and when I was living in New York. But having been in Australia and having kids and
Yeah.
not really doing any of the things that I was familiar with in my life, I forgot
Yeah.
what I was capable of.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been pretty.
It blew my mind, because it wasn't until then, too, that then the work just came back.
So you had maybe been struggling a little bit, and then it was just like, oh.
Well, I was really out of shape because I had my second child by then. Well, he was only 3 months old, so
Whoa.
I was kind of like, yeah, struggling.
Yeah.
And then when I saw them, it just, all of that melted away, and the work just came right back. It really was
That's really
that
cool.
quick.
And so you had just finished the end of the intensive part of the training, and
No, it was during the intensive. So
Okay.
somebody came and started the program, and then they came and completed it.
And then did you do apprenticeship with them after hours of observation? And you just went to the studio on
Just went to the studio. I was there, because of my training. I was there from I would arrive 15 minutes before Shari and Ramona, which was I think at the time they would arrive at 6 or 7, and I would stay until 8 o'clock at night. They left around 1, and then I would just hang out. And then a few weeks after that, Ramona, I was doing a workout with this guy, Peter, who was with Martha Graham. And Ramona passed, and she went, "You're certified." And it was so soon, and that wasn't the process. So instead of sort of going, "Yay, I can go home now," I was not sure that
she mean that?
Yeah. So I just hung out for another month and a half because I was too afraid to ask her if it was true or not. But I'm glad I did.
You
'cause I
finally
learned a
asked?
lot. Yeah, she was like, because finally I was like, my son's so young, I think I need to go back home now. She was like,
what are you hanging out
what
for?
have you been waiting for?
That's really great. That's pretty amazing. I've seen lots of people that Ramona instantly trusted.
Yeah.
And with the work, with what their understanding of it, but like we started this part of our conversation, it was really about recognizing that someone had the common sense to, even when there were things that they didn't know, because you really learn you get all of your knowledge from years of being with people and all the different things they bring. And I don't know, I wanted to hear how you saw that happen. Did you feel like you understood right away, or did it develop?
No, I think it developed, but I had done the work for so many years before that it was really in my body, and she could see that. That's what I think. And then the rest, she also trusted me because I just have the kind of personality I have. I'm very disciplined from all the dancing, and I have a lot of integrity. Mm-hmm. And so she knew somehow that I would do things in their time. She just had a certain trust, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And I would never do, when I came back home, I was kind of freaked out because I was like, I hope I don't do the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And I was so far away, so there was nobody else that I could really work with or go to or refer back to get information. But there was not anything I wasn't sure of, or I didn't remember, or didn't understand in my body, I wouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I would come back, or I'd have her come out for a visit, and I would learn them. And then as the years progressed, I kind of got it. Yeah.
So what would you say to a new instructor nowadays?
Well, what I say to them, I get really... See, nowadays, back then, after you did the program, even before you got hours, you taught straight away. Yeah. That was the first thing you did. And you taught people who had never done it. Mm-hmm. And you learned to trust yourself.
Did you bring friends really with you? Is that the people you found?
You taught, the studio gave you clientele.
Got it.
And sometimes Ramona would have you work with somebody next to her, and she would say very little, and then later on she might do something in your lesson that made the penny drop, or she would help you and say something if she really needed to, and so you learned that way. But you were put on the spot straight away, so you had to know how to communicate the work. You had to take responsibility for it, and I thought that was a great way to learn. We didn't have apprentice meetings. There weren't any rules or regulations. Of course, the work was what it is, and within that frame, you just learned yourself, And so if there, like I said, being so far away, if there was something, I would either call her or wait till I was back in the States. There was so much material anyway that I was confident with. Yeah. It wasn't like anyone was going to miss out. And today, people are getting so much information. I don't know if it's because the age that we live in, they feel that they're not getting their money's worth if we're not providing them with all of these workshops and seminars and but it's confusing them almost. They're not really taking responsibility themselves for what they know innately.
That's true.
They're relying on the rules and regulations, or they're relying on your knowledge and your experience to think that that's going to make them any more than what they already are. They're not trusting themselves enough. Maybe because we're not giving them that
trust,
baton.
Confidence.
Yeah.
I felt there was something you said the other day in the continuing education seminar that reminded me of something that I see a lot at different seminars, which is that the way yours runs is there's a workout and there's a doing the work to understand the work. And a lot of the seminars I go to, there's maybe one person that is on an apparatus or being used as a demonstration, and you never move, and there's a lot more words.
There's a lot more words. There's a lot more,
It's a much more intellectual practice than it is physical.
That's right.
And that was
Imagine
something.
how he would have taken that.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
You know, if you think back, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have the pleasure of being around at a time when Joe was still alive, but I could only imagine from the people I know that were, and the work itself, that just would not have
I think,
out.
there's a real lack of physicality sometimes
Yeah.
that gets a bit lost.
And I was aware of it years ago when we were doing conferences, which are great because it's a great network. It brings people together and they're fabulous parties. But, you know, people ask, what do you want to teach? So you get all these great teachers in there, and they feel the pressure of going, oh my God, I have to think of a subject matter. And they go, okay, Pilates for the elderly, Pilates for the young, It's the same thing.
It really is.
I went around looking at everybody's class and thinking about myself, what I was going to present. And it's the same thing. Pilates is just what it is. You teach it for the body that you have, regardless. The approach is the same, regardless of their age, their abilities. You give them what they need.
Yeah.
So you're better off coming in and just kicking butt on the chair, or excuse my choice of words.
I like
but
it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're better off just getting the work in your body, because what happens when you start teaching, you see at all these CPEs, is people go off, they're at their own little studio, they start to develop a clientele, and they barely ever get the opportunity to work out. So the work gets lost in their bodies. When I work out, and then the very next person I teach after I do a workout has the best lesson, because I'm humbled by what I've just done.
You remember how difficult everything is.
Or how much fun it can be. And so that's like the best lesson.
That's really great.
And people don't, they think they need to have all that intellectual stuff, and it means nothing. It doesn't mean nothing, but it's not as beneficial to them as just keeping the work in their bodies.
What would you like to see change about, there's so much Pilates today, is that something, or tell us what you would like to see change about the way it's taught now?
I'd like to see people just really doing the work and understanding the simplicity of his genius. I mean, the guy was amazing. I've been doing this for 36 years now. Oops.
That's okay, we're not guessing your age.
76. And I've been teaching it for since 94.
Yeah.
And I've been training teachers since 98. And I would just love to see people get the work in their bodies. I see a lot of teachers today who even get through a program who just don't have any idea of what the work is or how it really feels. You look at the pictures of Joe, you look at the pictures of Ramona and Jay and all the people that had worked in that time, and I just don't see that same kind of strength in the bodies.
Yeah.
And I find that to be a great shame, whether it's this Pilates or that Pilates, whatever. I find that to be the greatest shame, because the work is truly genius. The guy was just amazing. You see so much. I mean, his understanding of the anatomy just innately.
Yeah. It's pretty stunning.
It's amazing. And this was at a time before there were physical therapists and books on anatomy and things like that. He developed something that's really, really special, and very few people are experiencing it, especially teachers out there. They just have not had the experience.
Right. So you would recommend that people learn, work out.
For real.
Do it.
Yeah.
How is a good way to go about that in your experience? Is it studying with someone? Is it?
Well, you know what? Oddly enough, because I've been resisting doing this sort of thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
And oddly enough, I think because of the type of life that we lead today with technology and everything, now that we're doing this, I think this is one of the ways that can happen, because the more that people out there realize that they may not be having that experience and feeling almost perfect, really, in a both physical and sort of emotional spirit balance, that they might try to really seek somebody out that can share that with them and help them have that experience.
For sure.
And this is probably a great way to get that word out there. So what I was really resisting, I think, is actually a good thing. Of course, there are some boundaries.
Yes,
with
of course.
What
And we're talking about
things,
using technology and video and things like that for working out. But talk about that, because that's a really big topic too.
Well, I think there's a really fine line. I think that if you use it to really see what the possibilities are, then it's great. If you are intelligent enough to know that you have to actually find somebody to help you achieve the things that you're looking at,
totally.
Great.
Yeah.
But if you're just and okay, I get it. There's people in the middle of a desert who might
there's
benefit
nothing for them.
from. There's nothing for them. They might benefit from a bit of it. But I've had that experience too, because I go to Russia and I've met some people who have done that or who have started through that process. Fortunately, now they've met
someone training
people
them.
But I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that haven't. And although they think they're trying their best and they think that they understand what they're doing, that their bodies, in an anatomical way, in using this work, is doing the complete opposite. So there's some benefits and there's some things that are not quite so beneficial. But so I'm not referring to that. And certainly, if even just rolling up is going to make you feel better and happy, then I'm all for it.
Totally.
But if you're serious about it and you are in a situation where you can have the opportunity to find people to align yourself with and to learn more, not even in respect to wanting to teach it, just in respect to wanting to feel better, then I'd say, use this as a catalyst to find somebody.
Totally. Yeah, so technology as a resource, not the only means.
That's right.
Yeah, and something that occurred to me that I resisted quite a lot with technology is that the thing that was so transformative for me is having a person actually physically present, looking at me, putting their hands on me. I think there's just so much
pushing you.
Yeah, there's so much to be learned and gained. I mean, there are lessons that I recall with Ramona that I felt like it was everything, sorry Mom and Dad, that my parents couldn't give me in 1 hour. And not every lesson was like that, but certainly there are times where you just really get something you need from having someone pay attention to you. So don't miss that.
And there's something to be said about, opening up your body and the blood flowing through it and going into your brain and just really feeling uplifted by that and really feeling healthier. And that leads to a whole different attitude in life. And it can transpire into a whole other set of circumstances in your own personal life, which is what we were talking about in the first place. I think that's what does it.
Boosting you up. Yeah.
And certainly it's a great way to promote people in studios and things like that in businesses, and that's always great. We all have to survive. But, I think if it's about the work, then find somebody who can really share the goods with you, because there is nothing like it. I mean, after all these years of doing it, I still just see so much in it and learn so much. This work does not bore me.
No, not one
ever.
bit. It just gets deeper.
It drives me crazy sometimes, when you've been teaching people for years and then they get someone new and they go, oh, I've never done that before. I've never heard that before. And you're going, after all of my effort. But even that is a learning experience, because then you can turn that around and go, oh, okay, well, how can I change that? Maybe I'm repeating myself, or maybe I'm not.
Maybe they needed to hear another voice.
Maybe they need another voice, or maybe they need to stop hearing my voice when I'm teaching them, or something.
Who knows?
Everything can be turned into a learning experience.
Right.